I'll be there. I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. Your true colors are beautiful, like a rainbow. Yeah.
Well, Todd, that warrants way more than applause. Thank you for
Thank you.
that. It's soul-stirring version of a song that is so beautiful, and the lyrics are touching and evoke evolution on our planet today of how people become awakened to seeing individuals and giving everyone the space to own who they are on this planet without to the best of our ability without any degradation or disrespect or heinous acts thrown upon them. So thank you. What a wonderful and perfect choice for today and to lead us into my conversation that we're moving to. I know you have a really fun original song at the end of the message, and we look forward to that as well. Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. So our day today, as I continue my conversations with Dr. Keith, is with an individual that I'm so excited to have her with us. And her name is Gabrielle Claiborne, and she is very well known. There's Gabrielle. Gabrielle and I have known. I was just had my little iPhone out right before I was about to introduce you, trying to calculate how long we've known each other. It's been a long time, a long. Gabrielle, we can't hear you. It's been a long, long time,
A long, long time.
a long, long time, right? But there was a space and time where we were not connected. We had grown separate in life just because of life circumstances. And through chain of events, which we'll talk about today, we came back into each other's life. And I'm just so proud of who you are as an expression of spirit on this planet, which I've shared with you. But I want to hit some of your bio before we get into our conversation. When I invited you to do this, we had the conversation, you suggested that we do this today because it's so close to Transgender Day of Visibility.
Right.
And as a transgendered individual, you have owned your transformation and became so involved on this planet in making a difference in the lives of so many people. And I just honor you for that. Such a long way from Jonesboro, Georgia for us. But not only
Thank
have you been
you.
very involved, but you're an author, a published author of a book called Embrace Your Truth. You have done TEDx talks. You co-own a company called Transformation Journeys Worldwide, which is a company that trains individuals on the most appropriate, correct, and
Right.
loving way to regarding the trans community as well as
Right.
LGBTQ components of life, right? I'd love to
Right.
have you share anything about that you'd like to share right now.
Yeah. Keith, can I call you Keith? Because
Oh, I want you to
that's
call me Keith.
okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having my voice as a part of this
Oh,
conversation today. I'm very grateful to be visible when it's very important for transgender, nonconforming, and non-binary individuals to be visible in this world. And can I just say for a moment, Euron and Todd, thank you for the music. Oh my God, I feel like I have been to church already this morning. So thank you so much for showing up. And yeah, Keith, so I feel like not only do I love what I do, but I do what I love in the work that I do while here on this planet. 6 years ago, I co founded Transformation Journeys Worldwide, which is an inclusion training and consulting firm with a transgender focus. So we help a myriad of organizations from Fortune 500 companies to spiritual communities, which I'm very grateful that you all are having these courageous conversations like today on their journey of transforming their environments into fully trans, non binary, and gender non conforming inclusive cultures. So I'm very, this work has taken on a new form over the years as we've stepped more fully and authentically in this space. And organizations are now recognizing that there's a business case reason for why this conversation is important. And, coming from a very conservative faith background, Pentecostal preacher's kid, um, I'm very honored and very grateful when I get to come back, what I call home to my family. And so hopefully today we can have some of those courageous and vulnerable conversations.
Oh, absolutely, we can. And one of the things that I was so drawn to you about when we reconnected in life is that you do live out loud and proud, not just who you are from your gender expression, but from who you are as a being of light and your spiritual nature. And that I think that that's just so fantastic. And so, what I'd love to prompt our conversation with is to start off with our vision statement, the journey of finding personal self empowerment through a spiritual awakening, and let you share with us what that means to you.
Sure. So, okay. So I can tell you that, I spent half of my life wrestling and grappling with who I was. And it was a lot of um, the, uh, the spiritual space that I grew up in that really held me back from uh, embracing my truth for who I was
Uh-huh.
as a transgender woman. So consequently, I showed up in the world, in culture, the way that culture expected me to show up. I was a good student, had a great education. I married a beautiful woman. We had three amazing kids, very successful business owner, entrepreneur in the construction industry. And there was just so many moving parts and pieces to how I showed up, but all the time there was something going on in the background that was invitation to me to get honest with who I was created to be ultimately. And it wasn't until almost 50 years old, and I don't want anybody to see anybody doing math in your head here. I made the decision to embrace my truth fully, to live as a transgender woman that I was. And this, when I came out, it turned every aspect of my life upside down, Keith, with my relationships, with my family, with my career, even with the spiritual community that I was connected with, my friends. Every aspect of my life was touched, and this set me on the course of rebuilding my life, reframing my life in a more authentic way. And, I love some of the important words, some of my words of value statement are authenticity, vulnerability, courageous, and I know a lot of these words resonate for a lot of folks here in this conversation that we're having today. But it wasn't until I started taking those courageous steps in the direction of my authenticity
Mhm.
that I started to start to show up in this world in a way that not only was beneficial for me and life-giving for me, but hopefully life-giving for those around me. And I can tell you one of the aspects of my journey, Keith, that was the most difficult was my spiritual journey.
Yeah.
But it was during this time that I found an affirming church here in Atlanta where I live, and that community became my life support, my lifeline. They allowed me to try Gabrielle on for the very first time, and I could show up in this space, in a space that was so meaningful for me as a human being, and to live authentically. And so this set me on the course of, coming to terms with my faith, with my creator. And it was during a conversation that I was having with my now business partner and best friend. She reminded me, she says, Gabrielle, God knew you in your mother's womb before you were born. And before
Right.
you were born, you were set apart. You, Gabrielle, are fearfully and wonderfully made in God's very image. And
Right.
when she shared that that affirmation, those affirmations with me, things that I'd known since a very young child, I knew that God loved me, and I started embracing that reality, and that's how I'm showing up in the world today.
Yes, because as you speak of authenticity, and that's true for all of us, whether or not our life is about realigning with our physicality, with our emotionality and sexuality, right?
Right,
There are many other aspects of life where if we're not living life, aligning ourselves with our core components. In metaphysics, it's called the being of peace, power, beauty, joy, light, life, love, and wisdom. If we're not letting that out from a form of expression and out to play, then we're not propagating the divine that exists within us. And that's really what
right.
we're all called here to do on a daily
I
basis.
couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't
Good.
agree with you more.
And you and
Yes.
I both were raised in religious environments that weren't so spiritual, but yet that environment spoke to our spiritual nature, which is what was yearning to be expressed. And so we just had to stay on the road, the journey, until it
Right.
would show up. And I'm assuming that the center you're speaking of is the Spiritual Living Center Atlanta.
Well, it actually wasn't, but I am now at SLCA, Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. So that is my spiritual home.
But
Yes.
the parallel I was about to share was that, and so now your spiritual home is the spiritual home that I had, that I found my voice in the
Right.
early '80s, and so I honor that. I really honor that for
Yeah.
you.
And I can tell you for me, Keith, it was like, it was something that I feel like the universe, God was calling me toward because, being raised in a Pentecostal home, I was always looking for something outside of myself
Right.
to connect with, to validate who I was and to validate my value and my worth, right? And it wasn't until I came across this teaching that and by the way, this is the same teaching that I was being taught at a very young age, but what they didn't understand is like they were always looking for something outside of themselves to make them whole and complete. And when I came to terms with that, God was already a part of me, that my innate essence of a human being as a transgender woman was the very thing that God created me to be. It just allowed me to step more fully into who I am.
Right. Well, and to just honor innately who you are as a being of
Right,
light, right? So the challenge with those traditional um, teachings, if you will, is that not only are you always looking outside of yourself, but you also then give that outside power all the power, right? And so then
right,
you're always in a state of supplication, hoping to please that power. And where when one comes into metaphysics or new thought, all of that is turned upside on it, turned upside down. It's turned on its head. Where no, no. The power is not just outside, it's within. It
right.
doesn't judge. It doesn't have that capacity to judge. That's not even a part of what it is, right? And that if you
Right,
want to experience more of the thing itself, one can only do that by expressing more of the thing itself, right? So
right. Yeah, yeah,
awakening to your own nature.
yeah. For me, Keith, it was almost like I felt like now I know that God had been waiting me on me all along to say,
Uh-huh.
okay, embrace who you are, right? As opposed to living your life the way people are telling you and expecting you to live, right? So it was almost like a self-awareness reckoning, right? To embrace who I had been all along. And when I experienced that alignment, what I feel like is an alignment for me, it just set me on the course of empowering me to finally live in congruence with who I was created to be.
Right. Yeah. So I'm sure then there's been a lot of healing
Hmm.
that has transpired on this journey. And I'm sure there's
Oh
more, as
boy.
that is for all of us. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, a lot of what I talk about in my book, Keith, is the journey that I traveled. And in my book, I talk about the lessons that I've learned, the spiritual insights that I have come to embrace as
Uh-huh.
integral to all of us as human beings, right? It's not like I'm sharing anything new with the reader, but I am sharing the perspectives that I've learned along the way from my own personal experience, from my own key of my transformation journey of being a trans woman. And it was things like, I mean, things that I should have known at a very young age, but I had to really lean into and step into in a more complete way, and that is things like learning to love myself.
Hmm.
I'll never forget in my early years, I lived in this Section 8 housing complex, and fortunately, I had full length mirrored doors right beside my bed. And every morning when I would wake up, and every night when I would go to bed, I would look in those mirrored doors and I would say, Gabrielle, I love you. Because all of the things that I was receiving from a world that was trying to judge me and condemn me and say that I was bad or wrong, I had to reframe those and to embrace who I was created to be. And that mirror work was important for me to really own the value of who I was. And it was, telling myself every morning and every night, I love you, I love you, I love you, until I started believing it, that I started stepping into it. It involved things like, coming to terms with our past. I know for me, a lot of the things that in my past I struggled with because they were failures, they were disappointments, um, they were shortcomings I felt like I was guilty for. And it was it was making peace with those things through forgiveness of myself and others that allowed me to see my past as something that was happening for me and not something that was happening to me. And
Right.
until I learned to reframe it in that way, it was like this ball and chain that I was dragging along in my life. But when a friend of mine helped me see that my past is, just that, it's an invitation to your greatness, that I started seeing it as an invitation.
Well,
So
Ernest
it's
Holmes,
things like that I talk
yeah.
about.
Well, Ernest Holmes ask us in the book The Science of Mind, and I'm paraphrasing, why is humanity conditioning themselves to be enslaved to struggling, right?
Right,
That's
right.
that is counterproductive to what the essence of the teaching is. So, well, what you were just speaking of fits perfectly with the two quotes I had to guide us to the next dimension, and I love them because I think that they're both very true. And the first one is, and I share that for you and I in this conversation, but also for those that are watching and listening, whether it's now or later, and especially if we have any young people that are processing whether or not they are transgendered. Yesterday, I was hiking with friends on this little getaway I had, and one of the women, who I didn't know the woman, started telling me the story of her niece, who's 15, who is transgendered, and they were questioning it whether or not it was true because of some of her outer expressions still matched what her born gender identity is. And I stopped her on the hike and I'm like, no, 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 it's not, you don't get to ask those questions. Like, you just need to honor her on this journey and provide a space for her where she can have some professional help to help her figure this out.
Yes.
You're not the person to do that. You're too close to this. So which then the quote is, you're allowed to be both a masterpiece and a work in progress simultaneously, right? Because I think we're all
Yes.
those, right? And then the
Yeah.
next quote is, forgiving is not a gift to someone else. Forgiving is a gift, your gift to yourself.
Oh my goodness, Keith, you're preaching to the choir this morning.
Girl, that's my
Totally,
job.
totally. Back to your first point. One thing that I've had to learn in my own journey. When I said, authenticity is a very important word to me because for so long I was living inauthentic. But I also realized that, authenticity is a journey, it's not a destination. Once you realize one aspect of your authenticity, another aspect of your heart is going to be calling you to another dimension, right? So, this journey of authenticity, whatever that looks like for you, it's just that. It's a journey. It's something that we have to understand is ever evolving. The more we show up, honest and integrity with what our heart is telling us, really who we are. And yeah, a lot of folks say, this is a phase, you know, um, did I do something to create this?
Right.
And so giving folks the support and the space to, like I said earlier, try themselves on and understand that this is a journey is definitely, what people are looking for and needing today.
Yeah. And as you speak of living from the heart, that is a critical piece. And what um, I believe that statement means is not solely living from the heart as an emotional act, but living from the heart, with the heart being the symbol for love. And love, from a spiritual perspective, the agape perspective, is the self-givingness of spirit. So how Ernest Holmes defines it. It's the self-givingness of spirit whose desire is to create more of itself out of itself. And the only way it can do that is through you and through me. So it's living from that transcendent space where we go deep into our soul. And then from there, as you just said, move into a state of evolution. Because living your authenticity, no matter what that element means for each individual, is about peeling away what isn't working
Right.
so that what is working can manifest itself. But that what is working is also a reflection of the evolution. So it's going to be different tomorrow than it is today, right?
Right.
So
Right.
what we're then all called to do, much like the name of your company, is to live in the journey of transformation. Now,
Right.
sometimes that's a physical transformation, and sometimes it's a consciousness transformation, and sometimes it's both, right?
Right, right. Yeah. One important lesson that I learned early on in my journey, Keith, was, how I show up today determines my tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
And, it's like a lot of times we feel like, we have this goal that we aspire to reach or to become, right? But reaching that goal is determined by how we show up today, right? And I really, I've had to learn a balance between my heart and my mind. For so many years I lived just from the mind, but it was the combination of the heart and the mind. It's that consciousness, right? It's living in integrity. I like the word integrity. When you know you're in integrity, you know that you're living in this place of peace, that you're living according to your essence, right? Whatever that
Right.
looks like for you. And it was coming to terms, it was creating that balance between the heart and the mind that was very important for me.
Right. And I learned years ago that oftentimes people think that living in balance is a very static thing, right? But it's not. And I was in a training years ago where the trainer was talking about balance and to put it in the perspective as if you're in a boat on a course, right? And if you're on a boat on a course somewhere, the whole purpose of being on the course to get to your destination is bringing yourself back on course, right?
Right,
So it's an
right.
ecstatic activity, not a static activity, right? And so
Yes,
it's being involved with bringing yourself back to the center, right? So if you're
yes,
saying it's bringing it back to your head and your heart, that's the balance of that happening. In class this week, I was talking about the evolution of consciousness and the way that it shows up for each of us. I like to akin that to a slinky, right? We're all of a generation where we remember a slinky. And if you
yeah,
look at a slinky that goes all the way out into the universe and all the way down to Mother Earth, so it's ecstatic, it expands and it restricts, right? Well, at the same time, we're spiraling up the slinky in thought and belief, and then sometimes spiraling back down in this spiral. But if you step far enough back, that evolutionary process is you're being called to a higher vibrational frequency than a higher
right.
vibrational frequency. You spoke of living in peace, and my acronym for peace is purposeful energy activates conscious evolution.
Yes,
Right? So when we're living in peace, it's not just sitting with our legs crossed and our fingers to our thumbs going om. It's about being
right.
purposeful in how we consciously evolve into a higher framework, as Barbara Marx Hubbard says, living from our essence, not our ego. In other words,
Yes,
our nature. And then as we live from that, because we live in a universe that's governed by spiritual law, then we, as a magnet, attract that exact consciousness back to us, right?
yes,
Which gives us
yes,
the opportunity to take a deep breath and then express that back out again. But the thing for, I believe, for all of us to remember is what it is that we have control over and what we don't. Our next quote is, when you can't control what's happening, challenge yourself to control the way you respond to what's happening. That's where the power is.
yes, yeah. I love going back to what you were saying earlier. For me, you can't separate authenticity from intention. When you're living authentic, you're living in this place of intention. So you're continually trying to uh, seek out seek out that perfect alignment for whatever is going on inside of you, whether it's spiraling up,
Uh-huh.
spiraling down, or becoming aware of that, right? So, I like to know and like to think that I'm living with intention every morning just by showing up authentically, just by being visible. A lot of times we feel like we have to do this amazing feat, but a lot of times that intention is just the first scary step, or that step that we have been putting off for some time because we are fearful of what may happen as a result of that step. But I have learned in my own journey that the more I lean into that intention of taking that step, of honoring what that is going to mean for me, whether it's spiraling up or spiraling down, then I'm going to the rest of the path will be revealed and unfold before me.
I love that. It reminds me of a quote that I shared in class this week as well from one of my coaches years ago. And he used to say, make sure to live on the leading edge and not the bleeding edge, right? So just keep pushing it far enough. But you
Yes,
got to push it. You got to push it.
right. Yeah.
So, can you speak to a moment? Let's say that we have viewers or individuals on here that are watching at YouTube on YouTube later that are on the cusp of trying to figure out whether they have the courage to take that step and live out. And what could you say to them about that? Not only just from a practical perspective, but also from a spiritual perspective.
Well, I would encourage folks to go to my TED Talk, because in my TED Talk it's entitled Building Your Courage Muscles.
Uh
And
huh.
so for me it was learning how to acknowledge what my head was saying, the fears that I was grappling with. Am I going to lose my family? Am I going to lose my job? Will I find a spiritual community where I can show up authentically? It was coming to terms with those thoughts in my head, but embracing the truth of my heart and aligning those things, right? I can do both
Right.
because both of them serve a purpose. Your thoughts are there to protect you, but your heart is to invite you to get out of your comfort zone and take those courageous steps. So that was the first thing I say: acknowledge the fears in our head, but act on the truth of our hearts. The other thing is that a lot of times I feel like we get stuck in a place of familiarity, a
Hmm.
place that is not our highest and best, because we're waiting on the full map to be revealed. And what I've learned in my own journey is that as I take one step, courageous step, the next step is revealed to me. So I can with confidence and trust know that as I'm living authentically, as I'm living in that Christ consciousness that we all want to live, that every step I take, whether it's a step and then a step back, or it's a step and a step forward, that it's ordained for me,
I
right?
love it.
But honoring the courage that it takes to build that step. And then the other thing is that recognizing that along the way, we're going to build milestones, the things that we can look back to in our lives when we need courage and think, well, if I made it to there, as scared as I was then, that I can keep moving forward. I can take that next step. And with every step we take, no matter how small, we build our courage muscles. We flame those soft, quiet whispers in our heart, and we can move forward authentically with courage and without fear of trepidation. So those are just some
Those are
recommendations that
great, great,
I'd
great
recommend.
recommendations. I love that you speak of courage in that way because courage, I've learned over the years, is from the Latin word courage, which means
Yes,
to live from the heart. So it all really goes back
totally.
to living from the heart, and you're also talking about expanding in spiritual growth. We learned in class in the last couple of weeks this article that I share with them from Dr. Jim Lockhart, one of my favorite mentors and teacher, who is an acclaimed metaphysician and author and speaker and all that. And he spoke of that the greatest obstacle to spiritual growth is comfort. And if we
Yes.
choose to live in comfort, that's what's preventing us from doing that. It's to, as you just said, let the heart, you said invite, I would say guide you to that space of discomfort, but then do that with faith, right? Not fear.
Yes.
And then if
Yes.
you have fear, feel it, but don't live in it, you know?
Right. Right.
So then it's so wonderful, but we know this is how it works. The way the quotes show up as to what we're speaking of. The next one that I had for us is, if an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. If broken by inside force, life begins. Great things
Yes.
always begin from inside.
Yes. I love that, Keith, because I really feel like for me, and this is in my book, I've learned how to live inside out.
Uh huh.
I have learned that my life, the way I show up, expands from inside out. You know, when people look at me and when they hear me speak, they say, Gabrielle, how did you get to where you are? And I say, I've had to learn that that coming to terms with, you know, learning how to live inside out, coming to terms with all those things that I had to come to terms with, do the work, do the
Yeah.
personal work, right? Do the meditation, do the journaling, do those things that spiritually lift you up and set yourself apart and set yourself on the course that you want to set yourself on. Do the work so that you can allow when things come your way, it's not like they're knocking you off your path.
Right.
You can say, I can brush it off, you know, I can, and then I can stay true to the course that I'm on. So learning live inside out has allowed me to deal with those things that have been coming at me, you know, from the left to the right
Yeah.
or behind me.
Yeah. The founding minister of this church and my teacher used to always say, don't tell your God how big your problems are. Tell your problems how big your God is.
Absolutely.
That's what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
It totally is that.
Yeah. So the next quote I have for us, and I thought it would be appropriate for you and I both, since we came from those little churches in the South, of
Right.
being told that we were going to hell. Um, and I remember telling a loved one later in life who said to me, I just know as a homosexual, you're going to hell. And I said, you know, I went there. It was the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the early 80s. It was the most fun I've ever had. And I wished it still existed. So, but the quote is from, it's a biblical quote, and it's this. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, if you abide in my world, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Yes. Yes. you know, there's a new Testament passage that talks about taking up your cross and following me. And
Uh-huh.
so for me, you know, this this journey that I am on is honoring, you know, the cross that God had given me to show up and make a difference in this world. And I feel like that my life now is a self-honoring life. It's an honor of not only embracing the truth of who I am and the God in me, but it's also acknowledging the fact that I am showing up the way that I need to show up in order to make the greatest difference in our world. So yeah, it's,
Well,
you
you're
know,
doing that. You
well,
are
thank
doing
you.
that. You are.
Thank you.
You are doing that, and I want you to know that you're making a huge impact on this planet.
Thank you. Well, you know, part of the conversation and the value of today's conversation is the power of visibility, Keith.
Yeah.
I think one of our superpowers that all of us have is showing up. Because when we show up, we're not only showing up in honor of who we are, but we're also showing up inviting others and as a permission, giving others permission to say, what does this mean for you? Whatever that looks like for you, right? So I feel like the more that we're visible, the more that we're authentic, the more that we're sending the message to the world that we're creating a world that works for everyone. And you too can get on board with this.
Yeah, I agree, and what I would want us as a community, and and I've been part of the LGBT community since the early, not early, but mid to late 70s,
Right.
and I know that on this journey, certainly that I've been on, having been a part of the community and having trans individuals in my life for years, it's been a long, hard journey. And
Right.
and I'm not saying for me, I'm saying for my trans brothers and sisters, it's been a really tough journey. And in the year 2021, certainly in the US of A, things are better than they were. And we're so blessed with and I'm so sorry I've forgotten her name, the woman who was put in the cabinet position, I believe it was this week, the first transgendered individual to hold
Yes.
such a high office.
Yes. Yes. I'm
But
sorry. I'm blanking on her name
yeah,
too. It'll
at the
come
same
to me in a
time,
minute.
the point I'm wanting to make is that I don't want us to become complacent, because yes, there is that individual and many people who are living lives out and proud, and visibility is important. While at the same time, the crime and degradation for so many trans people in our world is just horrific. And so, if there's
Yeah.
one thing that you could invite or share or encourage both our listeners and our viewers and our community to do between now and Wednesday on Transgender Day of Visibility, what would that be?
I'll share a couple of things. First of all, I would encourage you to reach out to me on Facebook, because yesterday I put together a Facebook post about things that the cisgender allies. Cisgender is a term for individuals whose gender identity, who you know yourself to be on the inside, aligns with the sex that you were assigned at birth. So for our cisgender allies, what you can do for Transgender Day of Visibility. But the first thing that I would encourage everyone to do is educate yourself. There are so many resources available out there on the internet to understand and learn what it means to be trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and all those different gender identities. We've got a great resource page on our website at transformationjourneys.www.com. I invite you to visit that. The other thing that I would encourage you to do is sit down with a trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming individual and get to know them. You know, there's power in personal story. And I dare say that when you do that, when you take that step, you're going to find out that we have more in common
Mhm.
than not. And so we're just another expression of the human experience. So spend the time to sit down with your TGNC MB uh, brothers, sisters, siblings, and get to know us, because we want to be a part of the conversation.
Great, thank you. Thank you. This has just
And
been a
by the way, it's Dr. Robin Levine.
got it. Thank you.
Yes, yes,
Dr. What's her first name?
Robin
Dr.
Levine.
Robin Levine. A moment for
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, before I give my last quote, I just want to tell you once again how incredibly proud I am to know you.
Back at you.
What an honor this has been. I'm so glad that we got to reconnect. We'll tell those that are watching that you and I got to know each other the first time ever, probably in seventh grade.
Yes, can you
Yeah, so it's
believe
been a
that?
long time that we've known each other. And
Yes.
I so look forward to continuing this conversation outside of this forum and this format. And as we continue to get to know each other, and on behalf of the world, thank you for the work that you're doing, that you are living from your authenticity, that you're living principled in spirit, and that you shine your light, that you just shine your light. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting this conversation.
You're very welcome. So I thought you'd appreciate the last quote that I have. And our viewers and our community will as well. And I just want to remind you all, if you want to know more about Gabrielle and her work, you can find it on her website, which is transformationaljourneys.com. Is that correct?
Transformation Journeys, www.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Please reach out.
We'll make sure it's on our website and on our weekly e-newsletter as well. But the last quote is this: I work with spirit. So if you see me talking to myself, I'm just having a staff meeting.
I love it.